ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
How you doing, BG? Just give it a minute. I think we should have a lot more people joining us. So I'm just going to switch my camera back off. For any Sangat that are tuning in via YouTube as well, please do bear with us. We are just gathering the Sangat for the report of this groundbreaking, the release of this groundbreaking report. Sangaji, just bear with us a few more minutes as we allow more time for people to join, and we will get the release of this report going. So just bear with us a few more minutes. Please do send out the link and feel free to invite others to join, whether that's via Zoom or on YouTube. And if you do have any questions about the situation, you can post them to the Sikh Press Association via social media, or you can drop them in the chat of the YouTube or the Zoom links. Thanks. So just bear with us a few more minutes. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Hey Sangat Ji, Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. My name is Jasveer Singh. I'm the Senior Press Officer for the Sikh Press Association. And today we are doing this live stream to present to you a report put together by those close to Avtar Singh Khanda. Hey Sangat Ji, what? Oops, I need to, apologies, I need to turn off the other link. Apologies, you probably heard my voice echo there. That was the YouTube link coming in at a 10-second delay behind me, which I've now turned off. But again, to summarize, so today we present to you a report on concerns, failures, and much more regarding the suspicious passing of Bhai Avtar Singh Khanda, Shaheed Bhai Avtar Singh Khanda, who passed away in June. Now, masses of the Sikh Panth believe that he was a target, or note that he was a target of India's transnational assassination program. There is clear reason why people think that he was a target of the Indian state and his passing was because of the hand of the Indian state, that he passed due to the hand of the Indian state. So we will get onto that and we will have the report presented to you guys and for you all to get an insight into exactly what the concerns are and steps moving forward. Before we get to that, I'm just going to summarize a few basic points about how we have come to this place where there is a transnational repression program by India targeting the Sikh community. And I'm just going to cover a few recent modern points because we could go back decades, but I will just go back beginning to 2014 when documents were declassified, which revealed that the UK government, it was confirmed, were putting trade with India ahead of Sikh lives in 1984 during the first event of the Sikh genocide in June, the Battle of Amritsar at Sri Harmandir Sahib. It was confirmed that the UK government decided to give advice to the Indian state to carry out these anti-Sikh actions, these attacks on the Sikh Qawm, the Sikh nation, with trade in mind and ensuring that trade deals with India went ahead. From there in 2015, we saw Narendra Modi come into the UK and he came in with a fanfare which claimed that he was going to tackle Sikh extremism. There was allegations of a dossier being presented to the Prime Minister at the time, which was David Cameron, and he was being shown a so-called evidence, alleged evidence of extremism, terror camps being run by the Sikh community in the UK. And of course, there was no evidence for any such thing existing. And research by the Sikh Council actually found that no such dossier was even presented to the government at the time from India too. But what it did show was that when Narendra Modi came, there was a lot of pandering to him. We saw so-called Sikh representatives meeting with him in what was essentially a PR stunt to show that Modi has apparently the approval of the Sikh community and the best interests of the community at heart. Well, whereas on the other side, he was actually trying to demonize the community, specifically the Khalistan movement within the community. Moving on to 2017, we saw Jagdar Singh Johal picked up in India. That's a prominent Sikh activist known for running a website, Never Forget 84, which exposed the human rights abuses of India and celebrated the resistance of the Sikh Jujalus, the Sikh freedom fighters of the period of the 80s and the 90s. And for this server, when he went out to India to get married, he was actually picked up by police, and hopefully we all know the story of Jagdar Singh Johal. You can search the hashtag FreeJuggy now if you want more information. We have a webpage, sikhpa.com/freejuggy now for more information too. And in 2018, we saw Operation Takuma, which Indian media claimed was a result of diplomatic pressure which saw five Singhs, some of whom will be on this call today, will be on the Zoom. Five Singhs raided, five Sikh men's houses raided by counter-terror police in the UK. They confiscated devices, all types of equipment, even just books and things of that nature, to try and find any evidence of so-called extremism without anything actually found. No charges have ever come of those raids in 2018, despite a big fanfare being made of them. And in 2019, we saw an uptake in these kind of targeting of the Sikh community and people speaking out, whether that's politicians or high-ranking police officers, and claiming there's an issue of so-called Sikh extremism in a way where they're parroting the Indian state idea that support for Sikh sovereignty, support for the Khalistan movement is in itself extremism. This doesn't correlate with UK law, but nevertheless, it does seem, and it did seem at the time, and it continues to seem so, that the UK is still looking to find ways, find loopholes to pander to India's efforts to demonize, malign, disrupt, and ultimately destroy the Khalistan movement. In 2020, we saw Operation Graftage, a joint operation between the India and UK, and there's organizations like Raids UK and Sikh Youth UK that have more information about these situations. And in 2021, we saw the West Midlands 3 case, where there was an attempted extradition of 3 British Sikh activists to India, where they would have faced the death penalty, again for alleged anti-India activities, which are related to the Khalistan, the Free Sikh Homeland Movement. When this actually went to court and the case for extradition was examined, it was found by presiding lawyers and the presiding judge that there was no evidence which actually substantiated India's efforts to extradite these 3 men for something as serious as the death penalty. But nevertheless, Priti Patel, at the time, UK's Home Secretary, who herself has openly shown support to groups like the HSS, which is a Hindu extremist group that has Indian nationalist ties to Narendra Modi's nationalist government, she validated this extradition attempt and gave it the stamp of approval, even though there was no evidence behind it. Moving into 2022, we've seen an exposure of the UK intelligence services role in the capture of Jagtar Singh Johal. So that arrest in 2017, if you can call it that, that detainment, which led to the torture of a British citizen, and a modern example of the age-old issue of the Sikh political prisoner in India under a regime. We saw the UK's role exposed in that directly. Reprieve exposed documents. Reprieve are our NGO that expose issues to do with torture and overseas detention. And they exposed documents which proved that MI5 had a hand in India's arrest of Jagtar Singh Johal. And in 2023, this year, we've of course seen a massive uptake in the transnational assassination program. There was an attempt in the USA. There was the assassination of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar in Surrey in Canada. And what we believe the assassination of what we believe is the assassination of Bhai Avtar Singh Khanda in just days before Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar in June in 2023. Now we're going to come on to more about this situation regarding Avtar Singh Khanda. I'll bring in Shamsher Singh of the National Sikh Youth Federation to begin discussion on this report. Shamsher Singh, please do join us, and thanks for being with us today.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you to Sikh PA for organizing and hosting this event today. The launch of this report has been a long time coming. As many of you listening to this will be aware, there's been suspicions around the death of Bhai Avtar Singh ever since his death became a fact. And these suspicions, I think it's important to talk about them because of the context Jasveer Singh's outlined. The suspicions are an important and valid part of our process in understanding what's taking place and being able to correctly locate what our response is in this environment of transnational repression as it's come to be known now. So before the assassination of Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar, there was a certain perception of the Khalistan movement among Sikhs even themselves. And then after that moment, everything's kind of changed now. And we're in this environment at the moment. So we'll get into the report in a lot more detail. The report will be available for everyone to download and read from a website called avtarsinghkanda.com. The report arose from this context of the suspicions around Bhai Avtar Singh's death. And those were basically three key factors. One was the fact that Bhai Avtar Singh was healthy, and he was fit and healthy. Sorry, I'm just trying to sort this view out. Um, so uh, Avtar Singh was fit and healthy, and he worked a strenuous job, and he never had any previous health conditions or any issues, for which he needed to see the doctor. And the other point, the most significant point, is that immediately before his death and leading up to his death, Avtar Singh was intensely demonized as public enemy number one. The Indian media even went so far as to call him India's most wanted terrorist. And it was a very high profile demonization and targeted campaign across all sections of Indian media in both Hindi and in English. And this was sustained from an incident that took place in March 19th, an incident where Avtar Singh Khanda was not present, yet he was labeled the primary instigator and the primary culprit. And then following that March 19th incident and the intense demonization, Avtar Singh suddenly is taken ill on the 11th of June this year. And then one of the final components in viewing Avtar Singh's death with suspicion is that on the early hours of June 15th, when Avtar Singh passes away in a hospital in Birmingham, before many people outside of his immediate family know, and before it's public knowledge, all of a sudden, Indian social media activity intensifies, announcing the death of Avtar Singh, announcing details about him being in a hospital in Birmingham, and then attributing his death to Indian intelligence as a victory of Indian intelligence, and overtly and openly celebrating his death before it was public knowledge. So those are the three kind of major components that led to suspicion that this death was not a natural occurrence, that there's something much more sinister at play here, and it needs to be investigated. And
Jamshid,
from
can I just emphasize a couple of points with that? So, firstly, in regards to the incident in March, it was actually caught on video, and it was a relatively minor incident of the Indian flag being pulled down temporarily outside the Indian High Commission. And on video, you can see that it is not Avtar Singh Khanda, but nevertheless, Indian media were claiming that man doing it was Avtar Singh Khanda because they wanted to focus on demonizing him. And shortly after this, a popular figure in the Indian nationalist world, Major Gaurav Arya, an Indian military figure who himself has actually come to UK Parliament and been celebrated by conservative politicians in the UK. He went on his YouTube channel and specifically said Avtar Singh Khanda would now be eliminated because of this act, which he was falsely being accused of doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. And all of that is covered in detail in the report. All of the facts pertaining to how Avtar Singh Khanda was targeted. But before we go into the detail, I think it'd be useful for us to hear from by Gurpreet Singh, who's on the call as well. And Gurpreet Singh, as many of you know, is the brother of by Jagtar Singh, who's been arbitrarily detained for 6 years now in India. And Gurpreet Singh was involved in the efforts, and it would be good for him to talk about the impact all of this had on the family. Because on one hand, we have Bhai Avtar Singh as a Qawmi Shaheed, but he's come from a family that's suffered intergenerational trauma, from his grandfather being arrested in order to put pressure on Bhai Avtar Singh's family to have Bhai Avtar Singh's father, Bhai Kulwant Singh, surrender himself to the police because he was involved in the Khalistan movement, to Bhai Avtar Singh's mother and sister then being arrested in order to put pressure on Avtar Singh. So there's a story of multi-generational violence and displacement here, and it's really important to understand the impact on the family. So before we go any further, it'd be really great if we could hear from Gurpreet Singh about that particular aspect.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Jasveer Singh Ji, thank you for hosting tonight's event to put out the report by Avtar Singh Kanda. Like to start off, I think there's not a person that misses Kanda. Even right now, although he's gone, we still believe that he's going to pop out of somewhere and he's going to start talking to us again. And it's still not a reality as of such because he was just that kind of person. And like Shamsher Singh touched upon was when Kanda fell ill, the Indian media seems to know more about Kanda falling ill and talking about poison before his close friends, family members knew about it. So that became kind of a suspicious aspect of it. And then when obviously Kanda passed away in the early mornings of 15th of June, it had an impact straight away. You're waking up and you're getting phone calls and saying this has happened and you're saying this can't be true. And that's an impact that we felt as his friends because we treated him like family. There's videos, pictures of my nanny when Kanda had come to the house uh, and done interviews. And when I told my nanny, and she's sitting there crying and saying, Icky, where, how did it happen? I can just imagine him sitting. And I'm starting off with this impact. This is my own family who Kunda had really got involved with the Free Jagino campaign, being vocal, talking about it. This is how we felt. Now you can only just imagine how his mother felt, who hadn't seen him for so many years. You can only imagine how his sister felt when that news went. We all had each other. We all had each other to console. All they had was each other at that point, mother and daughter, trying to think, how did this happen? He was fit and healthy, talking away, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden he's gone. Immediately, obviously, once he's passed away, we're looking at how do we bring them over? And I was involved myself in doing the Home Office application. We provided all the details required. There was a sponsor for the application itself. Jagjeet Singh Jeeta was the sponsor because he was the next of kin on Kanda's hospital records. And we put out the application as the strongest way we could in order for Mataji and Benji to join at Kanda's funeral. Now, I've dealt with a lot of cases. I've been an immigration solicitor for 10 years, and we provided the proof. And Kanda wasn't someone that was low scale. He was known as an activist. The UK government knew him as an activist. But the next day, after submitting an application, and I think this is important, we've not talked about this before. So we submitted an application instead of going through the longer process. We paid for the application to be expedited within 5 working days. The next day, the Home Office asked for evidence of Kanda's death certificate. And we say we don't have the death certificate just now because the death happened in unforeseen circumstances. So the investigation is going on, but they didn't do anything with the application. They held the application on for almost a month. An application that should have taken 5 working days took almost a month. We kept chasing them, asking for information. MPs kept writing to ask for information, and nothing's provided. And I was also at this point involved in talking to the coroner by emails, also writing to the police about the suspicions because of all the hype around everything. And at the time, everything led of needing this death certificate. On the death certificate, to have it issued, you have to give the reason of death. Now, Mataji and Benji at this time wanted to see their son, the body of their son. And we're trying to say, like, hopefully we'll have an answer tomorrow, hopefully we'll have it the next day, but we just didn't have an answer. So every single day there's a delay. Mataji and Benji are really frustrated with what's actually going on. And when the refusal letter came itself, I was shocked with the refusal letter because the refusal letter referred to Indian media articles, despite them knowing that they were, the Home Office knowing that they were coming for a funeral, they refused it. And I've I've told many people about refusals, and we get them. We get visas granted, but we also get visas refused. That was one of the most difficult calls that I've ever had to make, to say to Mataji and Benji that the visa has been refused, and as such, you wouldn't be able to come into the UK. So someone that lost their husband, father, and Mataji couldn't have access to Faisab's body at that point, and then not being able to come to the UK. So you can just imagine what that was on the family itself, how they felt at that time. And whilst we were all close here, able to console, trying to make investigations of actually what happened to Kunda, that's what we spent most of our time in respect. But it was difficult during this period being able to speak to Mataji and Benji, because all we could give them was hope that they were going to come into the UK. And for about a month, that's all it was. And then when the refusal letter came in, it made it really difficult. So in terms of the family, it's always hard when you lose someone, but it's even harder when you can't be at the final rituals. So I think Sangha here showed the PR when they arrived at the funeral, when they showed that Kanda wasn't alone. And it was actually heartbreaking to see Mataji watching Kanda's funeral live on a webcast. And I think that's the whole impact. I think we still feel it today of Kanda not being here. I think in terms of the family aspect, that's as much as I can add. But in terms of how the UK government have acted within the whole process, it's quite disappointing. There could have been compassion. There could have been leave that could have been granted, but they decided not to grant leave and make it more difficult uh, for Kunda's funeral at the time. I think that's all I can add at the moment.
Thank you so much for that insight, VG. Good beating, Johal. And of course, I think it's important to note that you yourself are a professional, a legal professional with expertise in immigration. So this insight into how the process of something as simple as flying in family over for a funeral from India, a family that have no prior convictions, criminal convictions, no accusations against them, why it was so complex and why there seem to be so many barriers against it. I think those listening in can make up their own minds. But thank you for that insight. Shamsher Singh?
Anji, as many of you know, that as well as by Avtar Singh Kanda in the UK, India has been exposed in multiple assassinations and attempted assassinations immediately following what happened in the UK. So before Bhai Avtar Singh Kanda was taken ill on the 11th of June, on the 6th of May, previously, Paramjit Singh Panjwar was assassinated in Lahore, with a hit that was attributed to Indian intelligence. And then immediately 2 days, 3 days following, Bhai Avtar Singh passes away on the 15th of June. And then on the 18th of June, Bhai Hardeep Singh is shot in a Gurdwara parking lot in Canada. And when that happened, immediately the reaction from the Sikh community was that this was a hit, an assassination carried out by India. Those suspicions turned out to be completely accurate, and the Canadian government then went on to publicly say in its parliament that that there were credible allegations of the involvement of India. More details emerged around that, particularly in the US, with an attempted assassination that was planned to occur around the same time, in May, June of this year. And that assassination and the fallout with that actually provides a lot of detail. The attempted assassination, sorry, around Gurpratwant Singh. The documents that were unveiled by the Justice Department in America, the indictment provides substantial detail that links what happened in America to what was happening in Canada. So we've got Brahmdeep Kaur from Sikh Youth of America, who's going to speak a bit about the context, about what's happening in America, and the larger implications, and how Sikhs in America are viewing this current moment. So we can pass over to you, Brahmdeep Kaur from Sikh Youth of America.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for introducing me, Shamsher Viji, and thank you for organizing this event. I'm going to, as Viji mentioned, I'm going to talk a bit more about the US context in regards to the pattern of assassinations that occurred, which include Bhai Avtar Singh Khanda, Bhai Paramjit Singh Panjwad, and Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And since I'm based in California, I'll be talking particularly about what is occurring in California. With the release of the indictment, it just provides evidence of what activists in the US and in other countries in the diaspora already knew to be true, that Indian agencies are targeting dissenters here and Khalistanis particularly in the US. They were caught this once, but India has maintained a large presence here through political lobbying and intelligence gathering. And as Vijay talked earlier, Bhai Avtar Singh was demonized in the media for an incident that occurred at the UK consulate. A similar incident occurred in the SF consulate around that time as well, when the Morcha in Punjab was active during the crackdown in Punjab. We had coordinated protests at a lot of consulates in various diaspora countries, Canada, here, UK. And these seem to have struck a nerve, particularly with India and Indian intelligence. Similarly, Bhai Hardeep Singh and Khadku and Bhai Paramjit Singh Panjwad were also demonized in the press, whether before their assassinations or posthumously. They were painted as, terrorists that were, this was coming for them, right? We've seen the bragging of Indian people and Indian intelligence officers when it comes to their assassinations. So conclusively, we can say that the state and the media are painting a target and then they take action on it. In the leaked memo from the Ministry of External Affairs that was, leaked by The Intercept, there were notable American organizations that were listed in relation to the consular incidents. So this was a crackdown in response after these incidents, but it's a huge thing to note that it is not just because of these incidents. There has been a large scale of harassment, targeting, and response to Khalistani activists in the US and particularly in California. There's a multi-layered and scaled Indian state surveillance program here. And especially in California, because of the proximity to the San Francisco consul and, the large active Sikh community here, protests at the SF consulate have been going on for decades here. And so, diaspora Sikhs continue to prove to be a large threat to India. And they also continue their decades-long work into instilling themselves in the American community and gathering intelligence here. So in relation to how it works here is that we have seen in the past couple of years, but in general in the past decades, that the consulate has been building this, like I said, multi-layered surveillance program where they're able to have the power of Hindu lobbyists and Hindu orgs here, far-right orgs that are directly connected to the HSS. And, the way that it is because political lobbying is so important here and is so powerful. They use this, especially since there's a lot of Indian presence in the Silicon Valley. They use this to kind of get as much influence as they can. The consulates will be visiting as many events as they can, try to instill them, like they said in the memo, moderate Sikhs, right? We have a lot of Sikhs here that are, aligning themselves with the consulate. And, now, there's been a firm line now where the Sikh community has said we will not be okay with anyone who even interacts with any consular officials, considering we know what they have done and their involvement in the assassinations and attempted assassinations. So in general, it's not just the targeting of specific Sikh activists, but understanding that this is a more like macro targeted attack against anyone who's Khalistani or Khalistan adjacent, and also the community as a whole. As we see, our gurdwaras also routinely surveilled by, individuals that are coming in and trying to threaten, terrorize, and try to continue building relationships with Punjabi Sikhs, gurdwaras, gurdwara committees, not every Gurdwara has a strict policy on not allowing consulates to come to the Gurdwara, and they honor them and etc. So there is, despite there being a large Sikh community here, there is a bit of a divide where a lot of people who ally themselves with the consulate in order to secure their own well-being, there's been like a firm line where that will not be crossed. There's been talks in the community of not allowing that to happen anymore. And anyone seen interacting with this kind of these cells of people that, are gathering intelligence, as we know that the consulate has raw agents in it. And we've known this for a while. It is only proved now that we know that they, take on these fake vice consular positions, right? And they rotate in and out. In general, in California, we've had a crackdown where, the NIA has been raiding on about 15 families in Punjab. So there's been, they're using proxy punishment and repression in a way where they're, targeting families and trying to, even anyone who is even, kind of related to anyone is being questioned and interrogated in Punjab and here. This is all in reaction to the incident at the consulate that occurred, where they're originally in the local report, there was only 5 people. But then they expanded the list to include a dozen named Sikh activists, and then from a variety of organizations, like they said, like Bhai Singh was not even there at that incident. This is their way of, trying to terrorize and get as many groups of Sikhs, activists of different, Jathebandiyan to be targeted. And for them, they expanded the list to include actually hundreds of people who could have been present, not even who were, but could have been at the consulate. So, again, this is just a way for them to terrorize, create fear, create mistrust, paint certain people in the media. And, and all of these names and everything was added after the fact onto an FIR with UAPA, I forgot the acronym, but it's the one where it's like terrorism.
Unlawful Activities Prevention Act.
Thank you, Jasveer Singh. Yes, so they took that and they put it on all of these activists, whether they were present at the consulate or not. Again, like what we have seen and the conversations that we've had is that they don't have the evidence, just as in Bhai Avtar Singh's case, they didn't have the evidence, but they just want to terrorize, create fear, create mistrust, and most importantly, they're trying to gather intelligence on us through us by conducting forced interrogations and creating this fear of like, "Tusi sade naal gall karo," you have to talk with us, right? And from what we have seen, they don't have evidence and they really are just trying to get others to turn on each other and report on themselves, right? So it's, this is, again, like this approach of surveillance, whether it's people here that are, connected to the Sikh community that are kind of being middlemen and gathering intelligence for the consulate and RAW and NIA and IB, these Indian agencies are just working hard to try to, cover as much ground as possible. And at the end of the day, gather intelligence against us from us, right? So they are still, as we know, not as organized as we saw in the indictment when it comes to working here, but they have the support of so-called nonprofit, HSS-backed Hindu organizations here. And they use that to create as much like political change here, and to just like Apani Tangafsoni, just try to get their seats at the table, whether it's in politics or if it's in the community, local level, police agencies. And lastly, there's been talks of, what action do we take from here? And strategically, there are a lot of ways that as a Panth we need to move forward. Most importantly, being clear about our demands and then going beyond acting as citizens of these countries, right? Acting as a Panth, as a displaced people who are actively looking for liberation back home in our Raj, right? And for the Prapti of this Raj, we have to see, how can we move forward from what is comfortable and familiar to us, such as, advocating for, congressmen and, such as the transnational repression bill, these things while they do address, foreign agents that are coming in, how do they recognize the nonprofits that are working as foreign agents here in the US, right? The ones that are supported and funded by the government themselves. So, just to conclude, like, how can we go beyond these bills? How can we go beyond politics in terms of grassroots organizing? Because we know that grassroots organizing, those protests, those, free, drawing awareness and creating content online, these are the things that really hurt them and that they're really fearful of. They are fearful of our connections to politics here, but that thing of our building ourselves our own narrative, which is something that you all are doing here with the report, where you're able to build conclusively our own investigation when we know that we cannot rely on the investigations of the police and government and the media. And so, going beyond that, continuing this kind of approach, we need to see, again, clear about our demands and start advocating and see what is actually fulfilling our demands as a Panth. And, Panthic tradition, it dictates a strong response from us, which is currently absent. And we need to cultivate the space to have these conversations about moving the mark on our activism that, meet the demands and, first of all, our responsibilities of being in the diaspora, and supporting the Sangash home, and again, continuing this type of investigative research into our issues. It will, because we know that the media and local agencies will never reveal or support the truth, such as the case in Avtar Singh's investigation. So it's important that we continue speaking our such and, keep connecting with other like-minded people internationally. So thank you for inviting me to speak about like the American context of things. And I hope that we can, continue to draw these connections and this pattern, from Bhai Avtar Singh Khanda to Paramjit Singh Panjwar to Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and all of the unknown people that, we're still investigating have suspicious deaths. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Benji, for that insight into the transnational repression issues we see in the USA. It's important to note that this is a global issue for the Sikh diaspora. So whilst it's most prominently recognized in Canada and perhaps the UK, it's now evidently becoming much more prominent in the USA. And of course, there's issues in Australia. We've even seen Hindu extremists deported from Australia for specifically violently targeting the Sikh community. There's been Indian espionage agents arrested and charged in Germany. And we've also had reports of similar issues in France, in Holland, and across the world. So this is very much a global issue for the Sikh diaspora. Shamsher Singh, I'll pass it on to you now.
Anji, thank you, Jasveer. That's all really, really important context. And that was one of the kind of challenges with the report as well, because there's such a long history of what's happened in Punjab, our struggle for our Padshahi, the interruption to our existence that colonization represents, and the ongoing violence of the Indian state. And that manifests itself in many, many different forms. And today, the language is about foreign interference and transnational repression. But just a few decades ago, the language was around extrajudicial murders and encounter killings and torture and sexual violence that took place in Indian police stations, abductions and bodies being dumped in rivers. So the scale of the violence that we're confronting from the Indian state is massive. And it's important to understand that this is a continuation. And as Benji identified, really eloquently, our response needs to go beyond these current methods that we're employing, and we need to look more back at our traditions as a Panth. Having said that, it's also important to advocate within the legal system, and that represents a particular challenge for us because that legal advocacy, especially in these countries, can lead to information being exposed that otherwise would not be available, and is incredibly important, as we've seen in the American case. These examples confirm what we know, and unfortunately, because of the conditions that we're living in, when these documents emerge, then everything that we're saying all of a sudden becomes the truth. And in that regard, we've got Jaz Singh from Sikh Federation here, and the Sikh Federation have been at the forefront of legal cases for a number of years now, including by Jagtar Singh's case, and have taken the situation with by Avtar Singh and try to translate that into a mechanism to hold the UK government accountable for its various failings. So if we could hear from Jas Singh about the legal process, the involvement of the barrister, the inquest, and anything else that you want to add, VG, and then we'll close with just some details from the report. Thank you.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ. I think from what you've already heard, everybody's heard around the circumstances surrounding the death of Avtar Singh Kanda. I think the bit that really was critical to a lot of us was the role of the UK authorities, and within that we include the health service, the coroner, West Midlands Police, and also the UK government, because they have done everything within their power to make it near impossible to get to the truth of what happened to Avtar Badi. So what normally happens, and it is typically routine for a coroner to issue a post-mortem, an autopsy. That's on any death. That might, and the threshold level for any suspicion is very, very low. However, in Avtar's case, it was just expected because of his age. He was only 35 years old, because of the sudden demise from basically 3 days in hospital. He walks into hospital, and 3 days later he's gone. Just that in itself would constitute more than enough for a coroner to order an autopsy. On top of that was all the political targeting that we highlighted to the coroner, that he was a target. We believed there was external forces in play, there was foul play, there was already claims of poisoning being out there. He had received significant number of threats, and the fact that it was demanded by the family that they want an autopsy and a post-mortem carried out. And this is where it started to get really cloudy and concerning and suspicious, because a senior coroner point blank refused to do an autopsy, which was highly irregular, despite there being unsurmountable evidence or suspicion there. To then refuse a family's request is, again, it's very rare or unheard of in such circumstances. But it's the sort of line they started to go along, was that we can only conduct an autopsy if the West Midlands Police find suspicious activity. And once the West Midlands Police were contacted, their response was, well, we'll only get involved further if the coroner instructs us. So it was playing one off the other, so both would avoid any responsibility or accountability. And we encountered this for about 4 or 5 weeks, ongoing back and forth with the coroner, back and forth with West Midlands Police. And ultimately, it came to, as Gurpreet mentioned, it came to a head where the family were blackmailed, in essence, emotionally blackmailed, in order to accept the death certificate and the cause of death being acute myeloid leukemia and pulmonary embolisms around the blood clots, in order to pursue their application for a visa for Avtar's mother and sister. And what's telling is, on receipt and accepting that death certificate, 2 days later, the Home Office rejected the visa anyway. And then you're left with a scenario of we had to conduct the funeral. But within all of that background, it's important, because this is going to constitute a lot of the legal challenge that we're exploring, is that not only did the coroner show a clear dereliction of her duties, so did the West Midlands Police. But they also went further, and this is where it gets borderline criminal, in that they obstructed the family in conducting its own private autopsy. If they refused to do one themselves, they were very clear that if you want to do one yourself, the family can do so. And the family instructed one. They then put every obstacle. They didn't allow access to the body. They then moved the body into a freezer, knowing that would be a further week to defrost and conduct such autopsies. So everything was done to disrupt any possible medical examination of Dar's body, knowing in the backdrop that the family would have wanted an open funeral where Kundar's body would have been seen, and that's what we managed to achieve. So these were the decisions that were being made by those parties, the authorities. What happens around September really was the revelations of Justin Trudeau when he stood up in the Canadian Parliament on the 18th of September and spelled out to the world how Indian intelligence had been involved in the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, which happened 3 days after Kundar's death. And that revelation really came from Canadian intelligence, giving information to the media in Canada, and the media who told the government they were going to run this story, and which triggered Trudeau to stand up the day before that story was about to run. The similarities to the UK is the barrister that we now have engaged and the family's engaged is Michael Pollock from Church Court Chambers. He contacted us and had some intelligence service officers that he'd worked with who told him that it was common knowledge in the intelligence services, in the British intelligence, that foul play was involved in Kundar's case. And that's quite a damning claim and quite a powerful claim, that if British intelligence officers is their current view that there was foul play involved in Kundar's case, it's quite a serious statement or allegation. And it's not coming from the media or lawyers or the family or supporters. This is coming from British intelligence. So we started conversations with a legal approach, and we all had agreement that the way to go would be to demand an inquest into the death of Avtar Singh and outline all of the factors on which we believe that to be the case. A press conference was held on the 2nd of October in London, and a letter was sent to the chief coroner in the United Kingdom to say, in Avtar's case, given what's gone on in the global context of the Canadian revelations and the death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and the implications on the Indian government, we believe Avtar was also a target of the Indians, and here is the evidence to support that. His death is suspicious. In any AML death, poison is a medical reason for AML. It is a cause of death associated with many other factors. And when something happens in such short time frame to such a healthy young individual, then it raises the suspicion. So these items were written to the chief coroner, demanding an inquest, and also calling out the West Midlands Police role in all of this, that they failed to investigate, because what happened was, due to the media pressure that accompanied the press conference, West Midlands Police had put out a statement or given a position to the media that they had investigated this case thoroughly, and therefore had got to the conclusion there was no suspicious activity. However, once then it was laid out in the press conference that the West Midlands Police hadn't interviewed the family, they hadn't interviewed any of Dar's friends, they hadn't interviewed his employer, they hadn't visited his home, they hadn't traced his steps, and they hadn't done any other investigation regards his technology, his phones, his laptop, nothing that would even be the basics, not even getting a statement. Then they started to backtrack. So where we are in terms of today, we have written to the coroner, as I mentioned. The coroner did respond and said this is a matter for, in terms of the process we're going to go through, is to demand from the coroner or the chief coroner to intervene in opening an inquest. If not, we will pursue a judicial review of that decision, and that will take it to the High Court to review whether it is legally the right step to refuse an inquest. With the inquest will come two things. One, a medical examination, toxicology, and a pathology report of the toxicology of Dar's bloods. we are already doing a private examination of this, and that will accompany the report we submit. But the coroner or a new coroner, which will initiate the inquest, would also order such. We can't now do an autopsy because Avtar has been cremated. And it will also lead to a public inquiry. And the reason why it will lead to a public inquiry is similar to the Litvinenko inquiry of the Russian poisoning, is given the role of the British intelligence and foreign intelligence, now especially since the US revelations, is that some of that evidence will have to be heard in private, and it will have to be heard by a judge. So typically inquests are open, it's public. An inquiry is the method of, is the form in which evidence can be taken privately, and it's usually a retired senior judge who would open that inquiry and preside over it. And that's the demand of the family via our legal route. And to get that, we are hoping that the information we've collated and our latest letter to the Home Office should create enough pressure. If not, then we will pursue a judicial review and see where that takes us. But ultimately, we are exploring all avenues down the legal route to ultimately have this investigated thoroughly. If not, certainly answers to the questions that we've been raising, not only within this report, but openly as well in the media over the last couple of months.
Thank you so much, Jazz, for that insight into the specifics around Avtar Singh Kanda's case. And there's a lot of concerning things that we hear there, especially the lack of basic protocol. You'd think in such a situation when someone on an international scale has been demonized and threatened, to not even investigate at any aspects of his day-to-day life and any threats that could be coming toward him, it is quite concerning, and it tells us a tale that can either give us an answer of incompetence or something more sinister. Shamsher Singh, passing it back to you.
Anji, just to conclude, and a reminder for everybody that's watching, you can download the report from avtarsinghkanda.com and read it in full, and we highly recommend that you do. And just about the report, it covers a lot of what you've heard about today, and it goes into detail about who Bhai Avtar Singh Kanda was, his family background, how he was specifically targeted, what happened to him, and then all of the activity around the attempt to have a private investigation. As many of you know, Bhai Avtar Singh was born in May 1988 in Rodde in Punjab. His father was involved in student organizing. In 1980, Bhai Avtar Singh's father, Bhai Kulwant Singh, was elected the president of the Students' Union in ITI Faridkot. And then incidents occurred, and Bhai Avtar Singh's father, Kulwant Singh, met Sant Janel Singh Pindranwale. And that meeting, you can read Bhai Kulwant Singh's Jeevani on 1984tribute.com. And that meeting fundamentally changed how Bhai Kulwant Singh was living their life, and also their elder brother, Bhai Balwant Singh. They both ended up taking Amrit. And then shortly after the June 1984 invasion of Darbar Sahib, Bhai Kulwant Singh was arrested. And then when they came out of prison, and they were married, they continued to face police harassment. Bhai Avtar Singh's parents were married in May 1986, on the 7th of May. And during the wedding itself, Indian police carried out a police raid on the wedding of Bhai Avtar Singh's mother and father. And just 3 weeks after marriage, Bhai Kulwant Singh goes underground. And this is when Bhai Avtar Singh's grandfather, Sardar Palla Singh, is arrested in order to put pressure on the family to give up the whereabouts of Bhai Kulwant Singh. And then Bhai Avtar Singh is born into these circumstances in 1988. And when Bhai Avtar Singh is born, his dad spends just 2 days with him before he has to return underground. His daughter, Bhai Avtar Singh's younger sister, who is arrested in order to put pressure on Avtar Singh, she's born in February 91. And then on the 31st of March, Bhai Kulwant Singh embraces Shahidi that same year. So the story of Bhai Avtar Singh is a story of the Sikh struggle, the story of multi-generational harassment, imprisonment, and surveillance, including Bhai Avtar Singh surviving family members, his mother and sister, that were arrested in order to put Avtar Singh, in order to put pressure on Bhai Avtar Singh. And Bhai Avtar Singh followed in the footsteps of his father. He was passionate about Sikh struggle. He got involved in student organizing in Punjab, and he was eventually forced to leave Punjab because of the concerns of his family. So he leaves in 2010. And then in 2015, the Indian government starts running news, as Jazz spoke about right in the start, about this dossier that was handed by Modi to the British Prime Minister, in which Avtar Singh was named as running bomb creation workshops in Gurdwara, like completely unsubstantiated, false, highly exaggerated, and sensational claims were run across Indian media to target Bhai Avtar Singh in 2015. In 2016, Bhai Avtar Singh applies for asylum, and during his whole time in the UK, he arrives at age just 22, and the next time he goes back to Punjab is his ashes returning back to his village. But the whole time Bhai Avtar Singh is here, he's actively involved in the movement that surrounds him. He's very vocal. He speaks on issues related to Khalistan. He's passionate. He writes about the Sikh struggle, and he appeals not just to within the Panthic circles, but also within the wider Punjabi community, acting as a bridge between Punjab and the diaspora. And Avtar Singh as an individual was a much loved person. He was incredibly energetic and warm, and he had many, many friends that dearly miss him. Um, and Bhai Avtar Singh's targeting begins on the 19th of March, when he's accused of taking down the flag outside of the Indian High Commission. And what we saw in 2015 was just a foreshadowing of everything that we saw following March 19th. And this massive media campaigns run to target Bhai Avtar Singh, including a former Indian military official, Major Arya, Gaurav Arya, who's also a consultant for Republic TV, and he's a major nationalist commentator, issuing direct threats saying Avtar Singh will be eliminated by Indian intelligence. So India's demonization of Avtar Singh rested on three main points. One was criminalizing Avtar Singh's advocacy for Khalistan as terrorist activity. This is something that India does consistently in order to target individuals. And then they made false claims linking Avtar Singh to Jujaru Jathebandiyan, which were completely unsubstantiated. And all of these allegations, by the way, they took the same pattern where anonymous Indian military security personnel were quoted in newspapers as giving, this, exclusive breaking news coverage. And then one of the main claims was that Avtar Singh was involved in giving support to Deep Sidhu and Amritpal Singh, who at the time was on the run. And this was considered a major threat for India because of its outside agitator narrative, which has been a long-standing cornerstone of Indian state propaganda. That any activity that's happening organically in Punjab in support of Sikh politics, in support of Khalistan, in even asking for greater autonomy, is a conspiracy that's instigated by Sikhs living outside, in particular Pakistan, but also the diaspora. And in that way, they found kind of like a perfect target in Avtar Singh. So these are completely unsubstantiated claims. This manufactured outrage was pushed to demonize Avtar Singh. And I can give you an example of that. One newspaper literally says Khanda is on the list of most wanted terrorists who have been allegedly giving training on explosives to Sikh youths in UK-based religious institutions. And that line, the UK-based training on explosive, is from the 2015 falsified, unsubstantiated, information. Again, this whole media targeting is based on these kind of claims. And then what happens to Bhai Avtar Singh is he's taken ill on the 11th of June, and on the 15th of June, he passes away. And with all of these suspicions that we talked about in the start, from the initial research that was conducted by the team, it was clear that AML-like symptoms, which is the reported cause of death, that AML-like symptoms can be induced by poisons and chemicals such as benzene and polonium. And also poisoning has been used to target dissidents to induce symptoms leading to their deaths. And India itself has historically used poisoning to target Sikhs involved in our Jujaru Jathebandiyan, notably the cases of Baba Gurbachan Singh Manochal, General Lab Singh, and Shahid Bibi Bimal Kaur. And the nature of poisons, why that was happening, and how that was happening is something that the report goes into detail on. But suffice to say that poisons can be very difficult to locate. And our speculation is that the Indian state, which has used these methods before, perhaps targeted Avtar Singh in a covert way because of their diplomatic relationship with the UK, is very different to their diplomatic relationship with Canada and the US. And as Avtar Singh had a pending asylum application, he did not have UK citizenship, which made him more vulnerable, as there would be much less compulsion from the UK to act if he had been a citizen. And that's the difference that we see in Canada and America. So regarding AML, Avtar Singh had no familial history of this illness, and these symptoms don't make sense to be emerging in somebody who is, a young 35-year-old Amritdhari person who wasn't obese, who had no exposure to radiation, and he was fit and healthy in his work. And when this was all brought to the attention of the West Midlands Police, and it's important to note, as Jasveer Singh and Jas Singh have said in the, when they spoke, that the West Midlands Police has historically been involved. Right now, the force is under special measures along with the Metropolitan Police. The West Midlands Police is seen as a corrupt, ineffective police force. In the 2018 raids that took place, the West Midlands Police ended up releasing the names of the Sikhs whose houses were raided, including myself, to Indian media. And that information should never have come out because it's contrary to the College of Policing guidelines. Because the individuals whose houses were raided weren't charged with any offense, their names shouldn't have been published, yet the Indian media published those names. So again, that demonstrates a clear link between West Midlands Police and the Indian police. And also we know from the case of Jagtar Singh that MI5, MI6 gave intelligence to India that directly led to Jaggi's arrest. So when all of this information around Avtar Singh being demonized, being targeted, being openly threatened, including receiving phone calls from police officers, which Avtar Singh makes a video about, and he names the ADCP of Ludhiana, Officer Patti, as being one of the police officers that's issuing him threats. Despite being made aware of all of this information, the West Midlands Police not only do they fail to act, they violate their own procedures in the process of this. So when the meeting is arranged with West Midlands Police on the 19th of June to speak to them and to give them this information, a crime reference number is requested from them. And this is important because giving a crime reference number is a legal requirement of the Victims Code of Policing, which is part of the official College of Police guidance on police practices and procedures. It's part of the law. It's your rights to receive a crime reference number within 5 working days. With this whole situation, it's the responsibility of counterterrorism units to investigate allegations where a foreign state is involved, or there's claims that are being made that this individual may have been poisoned using some unknown substance by a foreign state who is demonizing this individual intensely. Yet no such escalation was made by West Midlands Police. Given the seriousness of the allegations, given the fact that the crime reference number was a legal right, and it was being requested, West Midlands Police actually went on to say that this was unnecessary, that you don't need a crime reference number, which shows how they failed their own procedures. They didn't take this issue seriously. And when, a further example of this is when the West Midlands Police basically said that they acting on behalf of the coroner. When the coroner was asked to give an update about why a postmortem is not being conducted, the coroner goes on to say in an email that the West Midlands Police should provide you with a crime reference number. I need that in order to, act, because this is outside of my jurisdiction. West Midlands Police categorically then say in writing, we don't have a crime reference number for you, and I'm not sure why the coroner would need one. We've passed all the information to the coroner's office who are dealing with this. And then later on, West Midlands Police would go and give a public statement saying a thorough investigation was carried out. Yet there's no crime reference number. They violate their own procedures. They act negligently in this process, and then they go on to on a very strong defensive position, saying a thorough investigation was carried out, a thorough review was carried out. Yet we know from the reality, as Jazz outlined, that nobody, or none of his acquaintances were spoken to. His steps weren't retraced. His home wasn't looked at. His belongings weren't looked at. His phone, which contained records of the threats that were made to him, wasn't looked at. Nothing was taken seriously, and the crime itself wasn't documented by West Midlands Police. And then the coroner and the police act negligently throughout this whole process, creating obstructions and essentially forcing the family down a path where they have to register the death in order to get a death certificate in order to participate in the Antam Sanskar of Avtar Singh. Essentially, the family is coerced into this position. And there's a long history of AML symptoms being induced, poisons being used to target dissidents, and this is documented in detail in the report. There's comments made to the team, the mortuary team at Birmingham City Hospital, where those comments are leaked then to the funeral directors, where they say that they were initially contacted by the National Crime Agency and told to seal up the body and not allow anyone access, but nothing was ever done, and no reasons were given to them. And as the private investigation was tried to carry out, the coroner obstructed this process. An individual was identified who would carry out a private autopsy. And this is important as well because one thing Jazz mentioned, and this is really important to cover why an autopsy was being requested. The standard hospital testing procedures do not have the ability to detect the types of toxic chemicals and advanced substances such as radiation. It's simply beyond the scope of standardized hospital testing. This is actually being written about by experts that were involved in high-profile Russian assassination cases that involved radiation, where they went on and they said that initially the failure to detect poisoning or radiation was due to the limitations of standardized hospital testing procedures. So the post-mortem, advanced toxicology and a forensic post-mortem would make complete normal natural sense where the claim is being made and where there's a documented history of dissidents being targeted, not only in other countries, but right here in the UK. Yet none of this was done, and obstructions were created by the coroner. Permission was refused to transfer Avtar Singh's body. And ultimately, the team was compelled to proceed with registering the death as it appeared to be the only avenue to conduct a post-mortem and enabled by Avtar Singh's mother and sister to participate in his final rites. And as we know, the visa was rejected as the death certificate was issued. And both of these things are happening in tandem. As Gurpreet Singh spoke about, the visa process was meant to take 5 days, it ended up taking months. So it's ultimately our conclusion that the UK government, the police, the coroner were negligent. They didn't follow standard procedure. The degree of their complicity is something that needs to come out. But it's very clear to us that given these circumstances, given how Avtar Singh's death was announced, I mean, there's a tweet from an account that's mentioned in the report. One tweet from one account was made on the 15th of June at 5:58 a.m. And Avtar Singh dies in the early hours of June. And at 5:58 a.m., some random anonymous account in India is tweeting Khalistani terrorist Avtar Singh Khanda, an associate of arrested Khalistan terrorist Amritpal, is died in London. A news report said there are speculations that he has been poisoned. At this time, there was no news reports. This information was not public knowledge. And you see this same messaging being repeated verbatim and intensifying on the 15th of June, that Avtar Singh's been killed by RAW agents. Well done, RAW. And the team documented a whole host of messaging that was being sent out. And all of these factors, including, the very low likelihood of Avtar Singh conducting acute myeloid leukemia when he was fit and healthy, inevitably lead to this conclusion that Avtar Singh was assassinated by India, and UK is complicit in the cover-up. And as mentioned, you can read all of this in detail on avtarsinghkanda.com. And hopefully this report's the first edition, and as more information comes out and there's a much bigger picture here, hopefully we can revise this report and further additions can be made to it, and we can cover some of the larger information that's unfortunately beyond the scope of this report. But that's it from me. Thank you for everyone for listening. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So Sangat Ji, we'd like to thank all of those who have contributed to this launch of a report, and we'll be issuing all details about where you can see the report for yourself, where you can download it. We'll be putting that out immediately after this is done, which is going to be any second now. Just a couple of things to add on. Shamsher Singh provided a lot of important insight into the situation. With the West Midlands Police, there is not just an issue of they've been taken into extreme measures now because of issues within the West Midlands Police, but a whistleblower recently came out and exposed anti-Sikh hatred within the force and talked about how officers would reference Sikh men in a very derogatory way, in a casual manner. So within that force, we already know that there's anti-Sikh hatred exists. There was an incident in 2019 when a senior officer, Matt Ward, randomly accused the Sikh community of being a threat to the Midlands as well. He compared them to white supremacists who we've seen randomly murder elderly people in the streets of the Midlands in the UK, and to compare the Sikh community to them in that sense, to say there's similar issues of extremism there was quite reprehensible, and there was a big backlash from within the community, rightly so. So there's a lot of context here which paints a picture of an organization, an establishment which is unfriendly to the Sikh community, being in charge of such a serious incident. And the concerns there, you're going to find them for yourself in the report, and they've been relayed excellently by a lot of our speakers here today. So thank you again for tuning in with us today. Thank you all for your time, all of the speakers today. And please do look out for the report itself. We'll be releasing it now on all of our social media. Please do take time to read it, to share it, and to reference it when the discussions about the transnational assassination program of India is raised and how it affects the UK Sikh community. Anything else, Shamsher Singh?
No, that's great. I mean, if there's any questions, we can take some questions. Otherwise, we can wrap it up.
If you give me a second, I'm just going to check our social media for any questions. If there's anything else from any of the other speakers, but I did ask for any question to come through on social media. I think on a Saturday evening, people perhaps just listening rather than engaging. Just give me a second. I can't see no questions on Twitter.
So one thing I'd like to mention is that during this whole process of looking into Bhai Avtar Singh's death and what happened, there was some compulsion from within the community to declare him a Shaheed immediately. And that's something that was deliberated upon by those that were close to him, that had Panthik Sangat with him. And the decision at the time was that it needs to be looked into, that we need to follow some kind of process. And if no process exists, we need to develop a process. So as this investigation unfolded, as all of these findings were compiled, meetings were held with Panthik organizations across the world where the findings into our suspicions, what we discovered in the process of investigation, what happened, the background into Bhai Avtar Singh. Everything was discussed in great detail with multiple major Panthic organizations. And then our conclusion was shared that we believe that it's incredibly likely, given all of these circumstances, given the fact that India's targeted people before, given the announcements that were being made on social media, where there's no reason for people in another country to know about the death of someone when people close to him didn't even know. Given all of this information, it's our belief that something untoward has happened here, that Avtar Singh's been killed in a covert way. And they all shared our same view on this issue. They appreciated the approach. And then during Avtar Singh's funeral program, the declaration of whether the Sangat wants to decide, given all of this information that was shared with them at that time as well, that whether the Sangat wants to decide whether they see Avtar Singh as a Shaheed. And that declaration was made here in the UK and also in Panthic programs that took place in Punjab, that Bhai Avtar Singh should be viewed as a Shaheed given these circumstances. And we know now, obviously, with all of the information that's come out in great detail around Bhai Hardeep Singh, that India has been active in trying to assassinate Sikhs for many, many years. And it's just as Brahmdeep Benji mentioned, this is just stuff that's coming out now. This is stuff that we've known about as a community for a very long time. So I just want to speak a little bit about the process, that it wasn't just one group that decided that the Darja of Shahidi, which is one of our most respected positions that we can have, as Bhai Jaswant Singh Khalra says, it's the greatest gift, the greatest position that the Guru can bestow upon a Sikh. It's not something that we can just use, based on our own personal opinions. It's something that should be a collective a decision that we arrive at, and we should be able to deliberate and discuss these issues as a Panthic collective. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
No problem. We do have actually three questions. I'm going to address one of them first, which was actually a negative question by someone, I think, being a disruptor, claiming that actually it was well known that Bhai Avtar Singh Kanda was not in good health. This is not true at all. And I just want to give an example of how this is well clear that it's not true within the UK Sikh community, within the UK Sangat. Approximately 2 weeks before he passed away, Bhai Avtar Singh Kanda was seen by thousands of the UK Sikh community at the June 1984 annual rally, which happens in London every year, where he was working as a TV presenter for the Punjab Broadcasting Channel. And he was mixing with Sangat in clear good health for hours, walking around the streets of London. So in addressing that, it was more a statement than a question. But a couple of questions. And first was...
sorry, just
just
on that point as well. That was one of the processes. Of course, that was one of the processes of the investigation, was to go out and meet Avtar Singh's friends and family and people that spent time with him to find out what was happening. And that is actually covered in the report. He is part of a two-man delivery team working daily in a physically demanding environment. His delivery colleague, who was spoken to, said who worked consistently with Bhai Avtar Singh over 5 years, detailed the high-paced and labor-intensive work environment that consisted of 5 to 6 days of weekly delivery work. And his colleague mentioned that Avtar Singh was fit and healthy, never had any medical problems, never missed a single day of work due to health-related issues. And Avtar Singh, like I said, he was on a two-man delivery team. He would deliver two-man items by himself, which included household appliances like washing machines and fridges. He would deliver them by himself. Avtar Singh wasn't registered with a GP, and according to his friends and family, is because he never needed to, because he was fit and healthy. So this assertion that he had any pre-existing conditions is completely false.
Completely fabricated. Okay, so the two questions that have come through, and we'll leave it at those. Have any Freedom of Information Act been requested? Any FOIs regarding perhaps the police actions on this, or if anything can be obtained from the NHS?
Just to pull on, so we've got a full medical disclosure of all his medical records from the hospital, which is the primary data source. And within that, that came from not only a legal request, but a subject access request by the next of kin and family. So we have that. We've also subsequently asked for full disclosure from the hospital if there's anything else that would pertain to who was dealing with Avtar, not necessarily on his medical records. And from the West Midlands Police, so that will be part of the legal case and bundle. Ultimately, again, when you initiate a legal challenge, all of that and beyond an FOI is available through disclosure. FOI is very subjective and limited in some sense. So we will request all documentation, all decisions made on documentation by the police, by the medical institutes, and the Home Office regards the refusal of the visa through disclosures.
And the final question, and we can leave it here, is how likely is it for us to get any confirmation about the cause of Avtar Singh Khanda's death, especially considering the processes that we can go through now posthumously?
Then the reality is, and from having spoken to our private toxicologists and pathologists, we'll never know the truth. And that's just being very open with the Sangha. Without the body now, I mean, it's important to know Litvinenko's verdict came years after his death. And it was, his body was re-exhumed, reanalyzed, and that's where they found the traces. So having the cremation makes it very, very difficult to know. What we only have is the original blood samples and Avtar's case. Whether that gives us anything conclusive, it will be unlikely given the sophistication techniques possibly used. However, what an inquest will give us is that his death was not conclusive of natural causes. That's, I guess, what we'll get. I think the Sangat and those in the Panth have a clear view anyway, but we're duty bound to pursue this to the truth, as we have done in many other cases, whether it's Jaggi's case, whether it's the 1984 inquiry. We have to exhaust all avenues legally because it opens up everything else. It's not just about Avtar Singh Khanda. This is about the whole systematic repression of Sikhs around the world, and this is an avenue of getting that information out.
Yeah, I think we will leave it there. And as mentioned again, the details of where you can find the report will be following this immediately, shared on the Sikh Press Association social media, and I'm sure by various other Sikh organizations. But thank you all for tuning in, and thank you to all of our speakers for taking the time to put this all together and give the Sangat an insight into this very serious issue. Thanks again, and Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.